All right, welcome everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. So this is a big topic nowadays, and a lot of people are talking about it. The big event that's supposed to happen at some point between 2025 and 2027. So what I've got here is a short list of the various different key figures that have spoken about this uh, big event and its rough time period. And I'll go through that list in a second. And there's actually quite a few more people. Like once you see a list format, you could appreciate just how many different sources have been saying this for decades. Okay, so this isn't some brand new claim. This has been said stemming back to the late 80s. That's what I want to share with everybody. But also, I want to get into, based on all the key evidence, the most reliable sources, whistleblowers, and so forth, and key figures. What are the alleged scenarios that are being postulated might occur? So I've got these potential scenarios also mapped out. There's four of them, I believe. Only one is a negative scenario. The other three scenarios are positive scenarios. So I'll go through each of the scenarios, and then based on the little evidence that we know, I will give what I think is the most plausible scenario that we're going to encounter. Okay? So let's get started. So, this big talk of a big event to do with extraterrestrials, UAPs, UFOs, ETs, all that, right? All the different buzzwords. There's supposed to be some big event allegedly that takes place, like I said, between 2025 and 2027. Now, this actually started way back in the late 80s with a gentleman from Puerto Rico named Amari Rivera. I don't think his testimony has gotten enough ears over all these decades. He had a very, very interesting, compelling story. Now, Amari Rivera was allegedly abducted by extraterrestrials or had an encounter with them, maybe just a visitation, but he had an experience with them back in the late 80s. It was either 88 or 89. And just rehashing the experience in a few sentences, friendly extraterrestrials spoke to him during this interaction, during this visit, whatever you'd want to call it, or abduction. And they told him that in the future, in the year 2027, there's going to be a major calamity on the Earth. A big space rock is going to come down and hit in the area of the Caribbean Sea, which was where his homeland was, and will be very devastating to the whole planet because of these ripple effects. And that at this time, good extraterrestrials will come, and I believe all of these were human looking, right? They might have others working with them, but I believe they're all predominantly human looking. But that good extraterrestrials will come down to the Earth and actually, in a sense, redeem humans from off the planet to help save them and protect them. So this was a pretty wild and incredible testimony from this gentleman so many decades ago. So for people who say that the talk of a big event in 2027 is something new, and people are always saying that every year they come out and say in a few years this will happen, but this has been said from the late 80s. Okay, it's been 35 years plus that this has been on the books. So that's just the first one. Next in the timeline, there was an old clip from the 1990s. Back then, a few clips had surfaced out, like Commander X, as it was called. Um, Often in these videos, there were very few videos back then on UFOlogy. We're in the field of UFOlogy. And these clips had some, key figures and whistleblowers even. Some of them had their voices altered and their faces blurred out. These are the nature of a lot of these UFO related clips that came out in the 90s and maybe even in the early 2000s. There's a lot of famous ones. But in one of these talks from the 90s, it might have been early or late 90s, but in the 90s, there was a clip. I've seen it. It's up there on YouTube. Unfortunately, I didn't catch the gentleman's name. I have spoken about this in another video, and I may have actually recorded what it is in that other video. But nonetheless, there was a clip from the 90s where this gentleman was saying that he was talking about advanced technology, allegedly from extraterrestrials and all that. Fantastic stuff that will blow your mind. And he basically said that, the they will have to, not the extraterrestrials, but the authorities, to each their own departments, would have to disclose this information about this tech or where it came from, the extraterrestrials and all that. They're going to have to disclose it, because if they don't disclose it by 2025, he said, it will be disclosed by other forces. um, Very interesting remark to make. Now, 2025, 2026, and 2027, like I said, are the years in question here, right? So that falls in line with everything else. Now, next, I believe this was in the 90s as well, it may have been the early 2000s. Most people know about this one, Mr. Ramirez. And Mr. Ramirez, without getting into what his background was again, but everybody who knows about him knows what that was. But Mr. Ramirez had made a remark in similar fashion to a lot of these on this list, that something was going to occur. It was either in 2026 or 2027. I can't remember verbatim what he said, but the general essence of what everybody says here is roughly in line with one another, right? So Mr. Ramirez had made a comment about some big event. Um, I won't speculate on what he said because I can't remember verbatim what it was in particular in his case. But next we get on to the gentleman named Cliff High, or known as Cliff High. Now, I'm not here as I'm not here to praise Cliff High. I've watched a little bit of what he says. Um, I'm not going to get into him or try to summarize Cliff High up. I think he does have a lot of intelligence. I will just say that. He seemed to have, he created this web body, is famous for that, which I think used AI or something like that, or some type of programming at least. And this web bot could allegedly predict certain things. Now, it's a rabbit hole when you start talking about Cliff High. So, like I said, I'm just gonna keep it short and not talk about him, but his findings that he relayed. So many years ago, before it occurred, Cliff High had made some prediction. Might have even been made in the 90s or the 2000s, this famous prediction. But that's not super important. But years before it occurred, his web bot allegedly had made this prediction that, in essence, unknown craft like drones, what we would call drones now, would appear in the skies over, I think it was America in particular, and people wouldn't be able to figure out what they were doing or what the whole deal was. And this would lead up to a battle in the sky, allegedly between good and bad extraterrestrials, or it would be a battle up in the sky, most likely extraterrestrials, unless all the different nations pull out their secret spacecraft and fight each other. You know what I mean? But that's the essence of it. Then, of course, and he had the years pinned down as well. It was 2024 for the mystery drone things to show up. And ironically, in 2024, mystery drones did show up. So a lot of people were saying, oh, wow, well, the Cliff High webbot made a good prediction. But that was supposed to be followed at some point in 2025 with things taking place up in the sky. Now, I can't remember offhand if he said this battle was supposed to take place in 25 or just afterwards. But nonetheless, the main essence is that Cliff High was making well, allegedly it wasn't him, it was the webbot, whatever, right? But Cliff High was making the same type of general prediction that between 2025 and 2027, along this little tiny gap, that there would be some big ET event over the Earth that would be impacting upon the Earth in some way, right? That's the important essence here, right? So that's now 4 figures in the list, right? But there's quite a few more to go. So next, again, this is not a figure that, I've listened to a few things. I'm not a believer of this individual, but the figure known as Bashar, who is channeled by this gentleman on YouTube. I'm not going to sit here and talk about the gentleman. I'm just going to say that, I'm not a believer. I'm open to believing maybe some people could get communication. I can't say whether he's, factual or not. It's not my cup of tea. I'm just going to leave it at that there, right? But I've at least put him on this list here, right? So without judging this individual and the Bashar readings and channelings and whatever you would call it, I've still included on the list because many years ago, Bashar allegedly relayed through this individual that there would be some type of process that would start unveiling, start unrolling start occurring and rolling out in the very years that we're talking about, and that in 2027 that there would be something that occurs specifically that would change the earth forever. It's not really specified if that would be a good or a bad thing, but it's not just going to be there. We're going to see UFOs show up or something. It's going to be something impacting on society or on the earth, right? And that over this span of a few years, that 2027 date was, somewhere roughly in the middle. So a few years before 2027 is when we would start to see a noticeable change in UFO interaction activity on the Earth. So arguably, you could also say that, this kind of came true as well, because again, like with Clip Fi in 2024, we had these things happen. Now, I'm not here to say that the Bashar channelings are legitimate. I'm not here to say that they aren't. I'm including it in the list because it's another source that said it years before any of the things started occurring. Okay, so I've included that in the list. Maybe that channeling was right. Maybe it wasn't. But if it was right, it's lining up with these other things. Okay, now next we had Mr. Bledsoe, who's becoming more of a figure of notoriety in recent years. He's had encounters, allegedly, he says, with extraterrestrial beings. And one of them in particular relayed that it was in the year 2026, I think, or maybe 2027, that there's going to be some type of contact. Okay, so an extraterrestrial arrival, probably a grand one, and that there'd be an interaction, basically, i.e., a contact with like humanity. Okay, so that's the essence of what Mr. Bledsoe has been saying for quite a few years. Okay. Then, in going back to about maybe 5 years ago, I hate to think it's been 10 years, but time does fly. But basically, 5 years ago or whatever, we had Louis Elizondo come out. Okay, and Louis Elizondo had made some type of statements that alluded to, I can't quote them again, but everybody knows and knows what they are. They've heard them. They're familiar with it. But he made some type of statement that, essentially we would, something along the lines of like, we would have until 2025, 2026, 2027 to do this or else, one of those type of situations, right? I can't remember exactly what it was. But again, they're all of these key figures are saying things of the same essence, right? That's the key takeaway here, right? If I stopped and thought about it for a few minutes, I could probably remember what Elizondo said, right? But it's not important to waste more time here. Next, we can go on to Jeremy Corbell. Now, Jeremy Corbell, in like fashion, just like with the others, has said in his own words that, basically it was either 25, but I think it was 26 or 27, again, when some type of event will happen with extraterrestrials showing up to Earth. Okay, so what we have, the core denominators from all these cases so far, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 8 key figures. Now there's actually a couple or even a few more. I didn't take the time to go look them back up again so I could get the names down and put them in the list, but we got enough in the list, right? That's more than enough figures, right? So when we got Amari Rivera alone would be great. And, you got some whistleblower type figures as well, corroborating that concept. That helps as well. We don't need to have 8, but the more the merrier, right? But 8's enough, right? But there are a few others out there. I don't know how. I'd have to do background review on who they are and all this. I can't be bothered to go do all that. That's excessive, right? They may not be as key of a figure as some of the ones in the list that I read, right? But you get the point. But the core denominator, the one essence that all of these accounts or these claims share, is that there's going to be an arrival of extraterrestrials to the Earth. That's the one thing we can all gather from all of this. And I would say that if in an almost 40-year-long span, from the late 80s until now, that's how long it is, almost 40 years, we've had this warning cropping up every now and then. And it's always going to those period of years, 25 to 26. I would say that adds credence to it. Okay, this is not something like people are alleging that just cropped up with Elizondo or Corbell because they watched a Ramirez clip. It's not that simple. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, I think I've even heard, but again, this is one of the ones I'd have to fact check, and I just can't be bothered to go that far to throw in a few extra items to the list. But I believe some people have said that even Stephen Greer made comments basically he could be put on the list as well because he said things years in the past. But in either case, we have more than enough key figures in the list here, key sources, right? So there's going to be some type of extraterrestrial arrival, allegedly. Now, where this becomes very interesting, and I won't get preachy in this video, but I will mention it. Another point on that list would be the Bible. I've got so many videos where I yak about this. I don't want to repeat anything here because it gets tiresome repeating myself. But the Bible has warned that there will be an arrival of fleets of extraterrestrials in the end of days. They're going to be arriving here with Jesus, and he will send these messengers out to the corners of the earth to gather, to separate, the good from the bad, and to gather the good and to take them up and away to a new earth. So we are warned about this great arrival time in the Bible in many, many places and in high detail, not just in the book of Revelation. And the other thing that goes in hand with this is, you'd have to refer to my teachings for this, and my book is available on Amazon, but the Bible reveals that 25, 26, 27, this is the period of the end of days. And it's probably going to be in 26 or 27. Now, this is based on quite a few things, but again, I'm not here to start talking about Bible stuff. I've got so many videos where I've yacked about it for years anyways. But the Bible points towards these years. So when you factor all this together, this is quite mind-blowing that, all of these other sources on the list, they had nothing to do with the Bible with this. Like, their approach is not biblical. Very few people have the biblical approach, as I do, saying that these are going to be the years based on certain prophecies in the Bible, like the prophecy of Daniel, things about Jesus, right? Nobody else does that. So the other people on this list were not saying that 2026 or 7 is going to be the year based on the Bible. That wasn't their approach because nobody else has that approach. This is my point. So these people were saying it on their own reasonings, right? Whatever reasons they themselves had. Okay. Now, the fact that the Bible comes in from a totally different angle, but goes into that list and acts as another piece of evidence that it's something like this, an arrival of beings should occur in those same years, that acts as great evidence as well. So it kind of triangulates it in because all these are people who are, in the last 40 years, individuals giving testimonies from their own individual sources. And then you throw in the Bible, which is written, over, almost 2,000 and over 2,000 years ago, depending on which book you're looking at. And those things align with the rest of the list, right? So that kind of triangulates it in. I think it's, when you're considering the Bible, not everybody wants to consider the Bible, not everybody believes it. When you consider the Bible in that light, I mean, it really affirms that something should be happening. So what type of scenarios could we be looking at? Well, based on what all the key figures have said and the things that, have leaked out or have been squeaked out of people, not squeaked out of people, that sounds bad, but you know what I mean. There's a few scenarios, okay? One of them is negative. Now, this negative scenario would be that there's going to be an extraterrestrial arrival, but it's going to be more than just them arriving. They're arriving to invade or conquer or colonize, or even just to use the earth or take resources from the earth, whatever it might be, any type of thing on the planet, right? Maybe even including people. I don't know, right? But that falls into one bracket. It's a negative arrival, and they're going to do something negative to us, right? That's a very, scary scenario, and nobody would want that one, right? But that's on the table as a contender. Next, we have 3 positive scenarios. Okay, the first of which is it's an extraterrestrial arrival merely to acknowledge the presence. So the ETs are just there to merely acknowledge their presence. Like maybe they've thought to themselves, now is the time where, enough people believe whatever their thought pattern is, but they're going to show up and say, here, we're real, we're here, but they're not going to really interfere with Earth. They're just going to make themselves visually known, right? And maybe in the same bracket, maybe they'll offer some knowledge or science or technology for peaceful purposes, right? Like maybe something to replace nuclear, maybe something to replace oil, whatever it might be. You know what I mean? But this is the first of the 3 positive scenarios, right? They're arriving not to settle or anything like that, but just to acknowledge their presence and maybe also a little friendly exchange of something beneficial, right? The next positive scenario would be an arrival to settle, but not to colonize, like the negative scenario. So maybe they're going to come and settle and coexist with us, right? That would be a positive scenario. Okay. The third and the final of the scenarios is a positive one, and this would be if they arrive to redeem humans from the Earth due to a grand or cosmic calamity, including space rocks hitting the Earth. Maybe the Earth goes into turmoil, or maybe all the volcanoes erupt. I don't know. You know what I mean? Something crazy like that, or maybe even another possibility is the often rumored space war is going to take place between the good and the bad extraterrestrials. Whatever it might be, there's going to be a grand or a cosmic calamity um, that's it's going to be bad for people who get stuck on the earth during it. So these beings might arrive to rescue us from that. So that's a positive scenario. It's a little more scary than the other two positive ones, but you know what I mean? There you go. Now, that third scenario aligns up with the Bible, right? The Bible doesn't really talk about the heavenly beings coming down to earth and everybody just lives on the earth. No, it's quite detailed in how space rocks hit the earth. It's quite devastated and so forth, right? And the New Testament especially details how the good will be redeemed off the earth, right? Quite specific on that, right? So if you're biblically inclined and you want to consider the Bible piece of evidence on the list, like I said, that would strongly point towards this third positive scenario here. But keeping the Bible out of the equation, no diss to God, but just to be more universal for everybody else out there, if you want to keep the Bible out of the equation, based on the things that the key figures and the whistleblowers have said, what could we gather might occur? Okay, could it be that negative scenario? Unfortunately, maybe yes, right? Could it be one of the positive scenarios? Yeah, it could. It could be any one of the four, right? There is one piece of information that I've heard through the grapevine that allegedly, I'm not saying I 100% believe it, but I definitely consider it. But allegedly, people were given 80 years to return certain extraterrestrial bodies, okay, maybe even tech and craft. Without naming names and organizations and all of that, there, apparently back in the era of Roswell, certain things and beings were kept against the will of those beings and their race, and they were people on Earth were given a deadline. Certain people on Earth were given a deadline to return them, but because they didn't want them to be returned, allegedly, a polite threat was made that okay, well, you have 80 years, change your mind and to return it, or else. And the 80 years after 1947 would end in 2027. So I've heard that through the grapevine as well. Now, they might be positive beings or neutral beings in that scenario and might just come and do a little penalizing to whatever individuals on the earth, hopefully not everybody, in that scenario. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad or evil beings. They might just be positive or neutral, but just, dishing out some punishment for a cosmic crime, so to speak. But that would still be a negative scenario for us, depending on how far these beings allegedly are to take it, right, in terms of their vengeance. But I have heard that through the grapevine. But again, that if that grapevine claim is legit in actual fact, like that is the reality, that would still fit in with the third positive scenario, which I'm saying aligns with the biblical. So it could very well, based on all the things that the different whistleblowers have said, it could be a negative scenario. It's possible, but as a biblical believer, I don't believe that to be true, right? Um, but excluding the Bible from this, if you're a skeptic of the Bible, then a negative scenario is a legit possibility. It's unfortunate, but it is a legitimate possibility. It might be part of the reason why for such secrecy. There would be similar reasons for secrecy for all of these cases, but especially the negative scenario or the big, cosmic calamity positive scenario. Okay, so like I've already said, if you're considering the Bible as a piece of proof on the list, then it would be the third of the positive scenarios, right? But I'm speaking universally for the sake of everybody else out there. If we were to exclude the Bible from this reality, which of the positive scenarios could it be? It could be any of them. All of these four scenarios fit with the information derived from all of these different key figures. So it could be any one of them. I guess you could say it comes down to whether you believe the Bible or not, right? But I would say I don't. One reason I think that it's not necessarily going to be a negative scenario is because, if any of the negative beings were here on Earth already, they would have been taken over. If they're that advanced, they can fly through space and defy the speed of light and whatnot, or cross dimensional paths to get here, then I'm pretty sure they didn't need to go to our planet first and scout it with little spaceships. They would just come and do what they want when they want. So if such a thing is going to happen, that wouldn't account for, the alleged negative extraterrestrial interaction that has existed on Earth in the last 80 years. Now, I can't say for 100% certain myself whether that alleged negative interaction is legitimate or not. But if it is, then it wouldn't make sense that they've been here for 80 years. They would have no need to be here for 80 years if they can just come and stamp around and do what they want. They would have just come, stamped around, done what they want back in 1947, let's just say, right? So I'm personally leaning away from a negative scenario. However, I think even with the positive scenario, such as the great calamity that's going to take place in the Earth scenario, this is still going to be negative to many people because we're going to be taken off this Earth. That's pretty scary, right? So some people could argue, oh, that biblical one, it's not a biblical one, right? It's a scenario that could happen that aligns with what the Bible says will happen, right? But if you want to put it that way, this biblical one sounds negative. Yes, it's true, but it is still positive because we're being saved from the calamity. It's negative in the sense that we're going to, Earth is going to be going through great turmoil and we're going to be taken off of it. That's going to be causing people a lot of stress and anguish, don't get me wrong. But it's for the better good. So that is a positive thing. Now, a lot of people have said before, been a theory floating around for ages, for decades, that certain extraterrestrials want to come and settle on our Earth and colonize it. Now, or even coexist amongst us, right? The only thing is that every planet has different atmosphere. Yeah, there might be some planets out there very similar to Earth, but I highly doubt that an advanced race is going to come here and be able to breathe our air. You start to get into more far-fetched scenarios, like they require terraforming or equipment in order to breathe our atmosphere or survive on our planet. Like every planet has different gravity. Every planet has different elements that compose the atmosphere. There's so many different variables from planet to planet that even on ones that are very similar to Earth, it might be incompatible for life here. And well, allegedly the story claims that their home planet is, dying out, so to speak, and they had to leave it. If that story is true, then they might have no other choice, right? But they would have to be, of all the planets out there in the universe, if they're interstellar travelers, they should be able to pick one that's most suited for their needs, if this scenario is true. So you would like to think that if they're coming to Earth, it means they'd be able to breathe our air. But the only thing is that the extraterrestrials in that alleged story can't breathe our air and walk amongst us without additional aid. So I just think that's unlikely. If you have the interstellar capability and the need to find a new Earth, you're going to find one that's most suited to what you need in terms of gravity, elements, atmosphere, everything else. And you're not going to come to a planet that you have to terraform or alter the atmosphere or wear devices that allow you to breathe or alter the gravity for you and whatever. That's just overboard. It takes more effort, money, and work than to just fly to a different planet where you don't need those things, right? And as far as we know, the beings, which are the Greys, um, so-called Greys, they're the ones in that scenario, right? That scenario of a dying home planet is not said about any of the Nordic or Pleiadian or human type extraterrestrials. Okay, so what I'm getting to is I lean away from it. I don't think I'm leaning away from it being a negative scenario entirely, where a race of beings are coming here to settle or colonize on the Earth. I don't even think it's one where they're pleasant beings, but they're coming here to coexist, right? For the aforementioned reason, the atmospherical and the Earth, just the difference in the planet's conditions. right? It's just unlikely. If they were to come here and maybe it's easy for them to terraform a planet, maybe they can kick it over and make it what they want in a week. Maybe they're just doing that and they pick that Earth because they think it looks pretty or it has some type of potential or strategic positioning, right? That would become a negative scenario because they would have no need for us on the planet, right? If they have to terraform a planet and change its atmosphere, that means that we're going to be wiped out. We can't survive it. So that would become a negative scenario. So in order for beings to come down in a positive scenario and dwell amongst us, there's certain hurdles you have to logical hurdles you have to cross first. Number one, why would an advanced civilization come down and start living on a planet with lesser advanced civilizations? That would be like saying humans will go out and build tents and live with the gorillas and chimpanzees. That doesn't happen, right? Maybe they view themselves as educators and want to help rise humanity up, right? So it's all hippie-ish and nice to think, and I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's hippie-ish and nice to think that beneficial, positive race of extraterrestrials will come here, no matter what they look like us or not, that they'll come here and whether fully or partially settle on the planet to help move us along, our evolutionary or techno- technological evolutionary path or society evolution path. That is a possibility, right? That could be possible. We can't rule it out, right? If you're keeping the Bible out of the picture here. Um, and then finally, the third of the positive scenarios, we do have three eye atlas moving into the solar system. Even though that's probably not going to do anything to the planet, it's just an indicator of what else is out there and what could come flying by. And like I said recently, even if the thing itself is not on a path to hit Earth, it might hit something else in our solar system. A lot of people just think that there's only planets in the sun and moons in our solar system, but there's minor planets as well. And there's a lot of bodies of rock and ice and whatnot to float around. And all it would take is for some unknown space rock to come flying in, hit a bunch of these things, and send fragments scattering throughout the solar system. That would pose a threat to Earth. So it doesn't even have to be something that directly hits the Earth itself. It could indirectly cause impacts on the Earth. But that scenario is entirely possible, right? 3i Atlas, Oumuamua are good examples. That blast in Russia not that long ago, that was another example. So nobody could say that it's impossible that we might have some type of cosmic calamity. Uh, that's definitely a possibility, and we know that there's extraterrestrials monitoring the Earth now, right? That's one of the few things that the public does know and have seen themselves, and that's partially why they do know that one thing for certain. And if they've been here for all these decades, for 80 years or more, and they're not so far invading us or doing anything bad, they're basically just monitoring us and whatever else type of studies they might be doing. But there must be some type of like they must be our benefactors. Okay, maybe not every single one of them, but the vast majority of them must be here for our benefit because they sympathize with us or they've been ordered to, but in some way, a sympathetic relationship where they're helping us in some way. And if there is going to be some big space rock calamity that's going to take place, you would like to think that they wouldn't just fly off like cowards and leave us on the Earth, right? If they have all this great might and technology and ability to travel the stars and whatnot and blow our minds with technology, then I'm sure they could take us aboard some spacecraft and save us from this planet that's getting pelted with space rocks. We might get returned to our home planet after everything, eases up and whatnot, right? But I'm not saying we'll permanently be removed from planet Earth. But that makes sense to me. We know they're here. We know that they possess great crafts. And if a space rock was to hit the Earth and cause calamity, I think they would step in and assist. I would like to think they would. I don't speak for them, right? So even that third positive scenario is realistic. It is a possibility. And at the end of the day, it's hard to, I'm a biblical person, so I go with the third positive scenario as the most likely because it lines up with all the various points on the list, including the Bible one, right? So, but if you're somebody, because there's lots out there who don't believe the Bible, then leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know which of the four scenarios do you think is the most likely. You might even agree and say it's the same one that I picked, but just not for biblical reasons. right? But let me know what you think in the comment section. Which of the four scenarios you think it will be? All right, and all we can do here on Earth is just sit and wait and keep looking up, and don't point lasers at any type of aircraft, whether Earth or extraterrestrial. Don't be pointing lasers up at things. That's the last thing you want to do, right? But anyways, take care, folks, and God bless.